I'm an entrepreneur. But the two have a really cool marriage. And I've managed to take a lot of what I've learned from one and a lot of what I'm learning in another and see things a bit differently. So what I'm here to do today is to tell you all a story. But it's kind of a story. You see, I know how the conclusion goes, but I need your help in writing it. I think I know how we get there, but I'm looking to get buy-in from you folks. And the story is about how startups saved the East Coast. But before we get into the East Coast and we get into our challenges and opportunities, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and why I think that this idea might work. So, first of all, I'm going to take you back to 2004. 2004 was the year I graduated high school. And let's say I barely graduated high school. University wasn't only something not desirable for me at the time, but it really wasn't an option. I left high school to become an automotive mechanic, which was a job that I was doing at the time in Woodstock. And the real reason why was because I love street racing. And I loved it so much that I built a fast Honda Civic to the extent that you could have a fast Honda Civic. And one night in November, actually it was Remembrance Day, so I guess I'll never forget it. I was out and I was racing my car in Woodstock and I hit a pole at 180 kilometers an hour. As you can imagine, there wasn't much left of the car. I'm fortunate to be standing here today. I crawled out of the window and I remember my friends being shocked because the first thing that I asked was, "Is my motor okay?" It sounds funny, but up to that point, that's what I had invested in. That's my entire life. I had worked, I had neglected my schools, studies, I had neglected my friends, I even neglected my family by, frankly, spending all the money they gave me on this engine that made my car go fast. Needless to say, the motor wasn't okay. And what I learned was that in an instant, my legacy was gone. It might not have been much of a legacy, but once you've poured your heart and soul into one thing, and you see that taken away from you, it makes you think. It makes you think about what a real legacy is. So I realized I had to change something. I had to switch gears to keep with the theme, and I had to look at where I was, what my options were, and how can I have a legacy that can't be taken away from me in an instant. So I ended up going to summer school. I enrolled in summer school in Fredericton, and I traveled every single day in the summer until I had the marks to enroll in the fall of 2005 at St. Thomas University, where I was in the liberal arts program. Now, I never intended to stay in liberal arts. Actually, I wanted to get back into cars. It was still a passion of mine. And I thought maybe I could do something really cool. Maybe I could be an F1 engineer. I could build motors for Formula 1 cars. So after realizing I hated math, which apparently is a big part of engineering, who would have known, I decided that I was going to stick out the liberal arts side of things. But it wasn't the course of the school that changed me, but a specific professor who, at the time, challenged me to get involved with politics. She actually challenged the whole class. She said, "Go and get involved in a campaign." It was the year of the election where Prime Minister Harper became Prime Minister, and I was traveling from Woodstock with the riding of Token-Quack. All of the university-age students that were in university were at university, so that riding didn't have a university, so nobody my age, I guess you could say, was really involved in the campaign. So when I drove home an hour from Fredericton to Woodstock and pulled into Woodstock, the night that my prof challenged me, I stopped into the office. And that was probably the biggest choice that I made that really changed my life. I got involved in the campaign, and I realized that politicians generally are sincere. They want to make change. So I said, you know what, politics is where I want to go. So I got involved with the campaign, I learned a lot, and then I went to St. Thomas again and I ran my first student union election. Now, to frame it properly, the position that I was running for, there were actually 3 of them. And there were 3 people running, including myself, so if you do the math, it works out so that really we can't lose. But I was scared to death of a yes-no vote where nobody had ever lost to no. He still makes a formidable opponent. So I ran and eventually was elected on student union, my first election victory. A few months later, I had transferred to UNB, and I decided that I wanted to stay involved with student politics, but building a new network was difficult, but it didn't stop me. I ended up running for a vice president position, and after being at UNB for 2 months, I was the VP of the student union. This job was very important because it introduced me to what was going to be one of the biggest accomplishments of my life, which was municipal politics. Here, as a student represent students to the city and to defend them or to help them improve their relationship. And it was a bad year. There was a lot of vandalism occurring, and the counselor at the time said students have to go. So obviously, as a student representative, I took exception to that, as did most of my students, and we fought hard, and we ended up really winning the public narrative, and somebody coached me into running, and I usually say that it was after a night of drinking too much, making a poor decision, but the reality was it was the right thing to do at the time, and I ran for city council, and sure enough, a few months later, I'm elected at 21, city councilor in Ward 11, downtown Fredericton. It was a fantastic experience, but it also taught me one thing. If you want to work extremely hard and accomplish nothing, you should try to run for politics. It's the truth. It's the truth. You're part of a machine that is very difficult to maneuver within. The reality is that you're stuck in a room with other people who want just what you want, but they also want the headlines, and they also want the votes, and they also want the money that keeps them elected. It's a very different place, and it's very easy to become cynical and jaded in there. So I stayed around my full term. I even got the luxury of being chair of finance in the final year, helping to develop the city budget and present it as what they think is the youngest person in Canadian history to present a government budget. Very honored to have done that. But then I left politics. I didn't really know where I was going after that. I was kind of unsure. I was looking around and trying to figure out how I can make a difference. Because when I was in politics, I was exposed to some very systemic problems that I guess sort of scared me. And they scared me because no matter how hard I was trying to influence change, I felt like I was going up against something way bigger than me, and it was the East Coast. And that might sound strange in itself, but in fact, the East Coast, in all of its greatness, and I'll get to that in a moment, has some very serious challenges. We have some very serious, I'd say, correctable flaws that are ingrained into our attitudes. So I didn't know how to address this. I didn't know how to go up against the East Coast. But I ended up getting involved with a startup. A friend of mine approached me. He was looking for a co-founder to help build his own team. And I was sold on the idea. It's called TEDXYouth. We're a really cool way to share links. It's actually easier than picking up your laptop and turning it around, which you might not think matters, but why do you do that when you're sitting across from a friend instead of sending an email with it? It's because it's easier. We fix that. But anyway, back to this story. I realized that the startup community might be a cool place to spend some time. But what I didn't expect was I didn't expect to see how incredible this group of people were. They look at things so differently. They challenged me in ways I never ever imagined, and they revealed some of my favorite traits that I love it when people exhibit them proudly. So what I want to do now is I want to talk to you about what I saw with the provinces and the regions and the cities and the towns and the communities in Atlantic Canada that prevent us from maybe achieving some of the greatness that we know we're capable of. Before that, I'm going to touch briefly on what we all know is why we're as great as what we are. But then I'm going to talk about how startups, through exhibiting what they showed me, have the exact solutions to combating the very problems that we know. So first and foremost, Atlantic Canada is awesome. If you've ever been to the East Coast Music Awards, if you've ever done anything in any city aside from your own, you'll realize that this whole place is awesome. You can go anywhere and be welcome. Generally, no matter where you are, you can leave your car unlocked at night, and maybe even your front door. If you're being approached on the street, it's not by a disgruntled person, it's usually by somebody wonderful. And that makes me think that our biggest resource here that we could be most proud of is our people. Now, if you go outside of Atlantic Canada, people might not know where you're from, but if they've met an Atlantic Canadian, then you know that you're going to be favorable in their books, because they'll only have good things to say about them. But that being said, Atlantic Canadians have some things that we need to look at and consider. And this, of course, is all anecdotal based on my experiences as a city councilor and somebody trying to influence change. The first thing that I learned was no pain, all gain. People, especially people in government, have a tendency to find out the easiest way to get what it is that they want without sacrificing anything. And this is okay, but if making no sacrifice if you have not sacrificing anything as a priority, then it becomes very difficult for you to raise the bar for your own expectations. People in Atlantic Canada sometimes look very hard at what they can get, and sometimes we don't quite often, when it comes to how we approach government, look at what we can contribute, look at how we can give back. It might fall flat on the ears of the people in this room because we're all out doing something, we're out trying to move. But it kind of builds into my next point, which is a lot of people just want a comfortable, no-risk job. They want to have that place where they can go collect their paycheck, and then at the end of their working career, they can collect a pension. They don't necessarily see risk as something that's very, very positive, but they definitely want the benefits that they can derive from whatever they're doing. The other thing that drove me absolutely nuts is that Atlantic Canadians are preoccupied with being the big fish in a small pond. And this isn't so much about the people, but about the identities that we often affiliate with. In my time at City Council, the City of Fredericton wanted to be the best. We wanted to be the best in New Brunswick, or we wanted to be the best in Atlantic Canada. The province of New Brunswick, the same. PEI wants to do the same. We all want to be the best in Atlantic Canada, which, sure, that might be desirable, but what's the value in saying we have the highest literacy scores in Atlantic Canada if our region competes on a whole as the lowest in the country? We're just saying we don't want to be last place, and that's a scary thing if you ask me. The next thing that I learned very quickly was adults know everything. Adults know everything. You ask them a question, they've got an answer for you. Just like the last presentation talked about best. They know what's best, right? But they also seem to forget that youth are active in doing things today. We talk about how youth are the leaders of tomorrow, but if I waited till tomorrow, I wouldn't have been a leader at 21. We're all here today for the very fact because we're leaders right now. If we wait until tomorrow, then we won't be youth anymore. We can lead right now, but try to give us some adults that. The other thing that we have to accept in Atlantic Canada is we do not take criticism well. In fact, I'm happy you guys have all sat here in this room with me saying these things that I consider problems, because if you look at the history of people looking at New Brunswick or our region and criticizing it, cue Prime Minister Harper's comment about Atlantic Canada has a culture of defeat, or cue Richard Curry's comment about New Brunswick is a failed province. We didn't take a moment and pause and think, well, are we? Or what does he mean by that? What we looked at and what we found out was that, really, we just want to react and say, no we don't, get the frig out of here, this is our land, you're not going to tell us how to fix it. The other point that I learned was, oh, you're rich? We'll take that. We have an attitude towards wealthy people that makes us want what they have and not appreciate where it came from. We see this all the time, and for the sake of expediency, I'm going to move on to why startups are awesome. So I joined a startup, and I already said they're a dynamic group of individuals, and they look at things differently. What's a startup, really quickly? A startup's a business, it's a fresh business, but when we use the term, we're really talking about something that's highly scalable, which means, one, if you go to sleep, can it still make money? Two, can you take a product that you have with 1 million people and grow that to 10 million people, or maybe 1 to 100? That's the general idea when we're talking about startups. So, what do startups provide? Well, to startups, everything is gain. There's no such thing as something wasted. Even if you're not succeeding, you're learning. And if you do succeed, then that's awesome. The other thing that startups do is we raise the bar to the entire world. Radiant 6 didn't sell for almost $500,000 because they wanted to be the best in Fredericton. They wanted to be best in the entire world. What if we said we want to have the most literate children or the healthiest population or the lowest child obesity in the world? We can accomplish that. We just have to set the bar high enough so that we're moving towards it. Even if we don't get there, we're going to be awesome. We also have to look at young people's ideas. The startup community is made up of adults with experience and ideas who are looking for ideas from young people and trying to get them as fast as they can and get them to market. Young people are empowered. Something else that I talk about is the gold standard. The gold standard is about criticism. We have gold as we know it because it's been burned, it's been lit up, it's been torched, set on fire. then all the dirt comes up and you clean it off and you have something more pure below. As was mentioned in the video, we want that criticism because that criticism allows us to become better. If we actively seek criticism and dig underneath why we're being criticized or what that is, then we're able to make ourselves better, and that should always be our goal. If you ignore criticism, you might be missing a big point or some truth that can help you become something that's even greater than what you are today. And finally, wealth is awesome. Our society is fueled by the taxes that wealth is creating. We need people to become wealthy to start investing in companies like mine. My opportunity was created because somebody else came forward with their money and said, hey, I believe in you, run with this. If you lose it, then you tried. It also funds our healthcare system. It also gives us a chance to have free education like we have in New Brunswick. It also paves our roads. We need to support and encourage that type of wealth creation activity. Otherwise, what are we doing? We're asking people for something. I really do love the cliched expression from John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your government can do for you, but what can you do for your people? How can you support them through creating value? How can you take an idea and run with it? Startups are great because everybody has problems. And if you're able to find a problem and help somebody solve it, and see the smile that somebody has on their face after you've done that, then I think you've really, really accomplished something impressive. If you can take nothing and create something, instead of taking something and just spend it on something else, then I think you've really, really contributed. And I hope that you will help me write my story about how we can change the culture and attitudes here in New Brunswick, and we can improve on what's already a fantastic region and help start up St. East Coast.